is the nice-ass guy that gave me the broke generator. That's what happened. You remember that? Yeah, look at the receipt. There it is. Look at the receipt. That's not my handwriting. Yeah, that's your handwriting. That was you.
If you stop screaming and let me...
Don't even talk to me. Ask this ass he has it.
Hardcore Pawn never shied away from showing the ugly side of the Gold family business. Viewers watched arrests, scandals, and stolen art unfold live. But one major story ended without the explanation viewers expected, and the silence around it only grew louder after the show was over. Now, years later, the stories others told and what happened afterward finally put the missing pieces together. So what really happened to Hardcore Pawn? And what was Les Gold never willing to say about it? Join us as we finally reveal the truth about what happened to Hardcore Pawn. The scene nobody explained. Not long after Season 6 wrapped, with the cameras still rolling, Rich Pyle came back to confront the man who'd let him go. He walked back through the same doors he had walked through for a quarter-century, past the glass cases stacked with gold chains and pawned power tools, and headed straight for the man who fired him. He came with a theory, and he wanted it caught on camera. Word around the shop was that certain merchandise on the floor hadn't been acquired the way it should have been, and if he could prove it, it would mean the store had punished the wrong person. So he walked in with a film crew trailing him, and a plan already forming in his head. Catch Les in a moment the show couldn't edit around. Everyone on set could feel this one was real. Les stood behind the same counter he'd worked for decades and held his ground, insisting the store had nothing to hide and nothing to answer for. Rich wasn't buying it. He wasn't going to let 25 years end with a locked door and a shrug. He pointed toward the merchandise he'd flagged, tapping the glass case where it sat, and pressed Les to explain it on camera. Voices rose as neither man backed down, and when the cameras finally cut away, neither man had gotten what he came for. For an audience that had spent years watching this shop settle every argument in real time, the scene landed strangely. It aired, and then it was never mentioned again. The show moved into its next season without ever circling back. And no word from Les about why the man who'd built his whole career in that building was suddenly gone. Rich simply stopped showing up on screen, the same way he'd once shown up every single day behind that same counter. Fans noticed. Message boards and comment sections filled with the same question, asked 100 different ways. What actually happened to Rich Pyle? Some assumed he'd quit. Others assumed he'd been pushed out. A few assumed something had gone seriously wrong behind the scenes, something the show didn't want its audience anywhere near. Nobody from the Gold family stepped in to settle it, and the silence did what silence always does online. It got louder the longer it lasted. What made the confrontation scene so strange wasn't just what it showed. It was what it didn't. A man who had built 2.5 decades of his life around one shop had reduced his entire case down to a single accusation, delivered on camera to the one person who could have ended the mystery in a sentence. Les never did, and whatever answer Rich was hoping to walk away with that day, he left without it. By the time that confrontation aired, Rich wasn't just some employee anymore. He'd become something the Gold family may not have fully planned for when they let cameras into their store, a personality bigger than the people who signed his paycheck. And he wasn't the only one. Two men bigger than the owners. Long before Hardcore Pawn premiered, Rich had already spent 2 decades behind that counter, learning every trick of the pawn trade the hard way, dealing with desperate customers and dishonest ones in equal measure. By the time cameras arrived in 2010, the shop was moving through close to 1,000 customers a day, backed by a staff nearing 200 people. Rich wasn't a new face playing a character. He was simply Rich, exactly as he'd always been. and audiences fell for him almost instantly. He wasn't alone. Standing beside him for much of the show's run was Joel Shannon, a towering, no-nonsense head of security everyone came to know as Big Joe. Between the two of them, viewers got something the Gold family alone couldn't quite offer: the sense of two working-class guys just trying to get through their shift, dealing with chaos that had nothing to do with family drama or sibling rivalry. Fans latched onto that hard. It got to the point where visitors showing up at the Detroit shop weren't asking for Les first. They were asking for Rich and Joe. Tourists who'd flown in specifically because of the show would walk past the family that owned the place, cameras and autograph books in hand, hoping to catch the two employees who felt more like real people than television characters. For a business built entirely around one family's name on the door, that kind of shift was hard to ignore. Les's son, Seth Gold, and his daughter, Ashley Gold, co-owned the shop alongside him. And between the three of them, the Gold name was supposed to be the whole show. Whether that popularity ever sat easily with the people signing the checks is something nobody in the Gold family has ever addressed directly. But the pattern that followed is difficult not to notice. Joe was the first to go. During the show's 6th season, he was caught on camera pocketing scrap gold that didn't belong to him, arrested, and fired in front of an audience of millions. Everyone watched exactly what happened, in real time, with nothing left to interpret. The show let viewers watch every second of it, from the accusation to the walk out the door. Rich's ending looked nothing like that. There was just a dispute over an item he'd let go of that maybe he shouldn't have, an apology that seemed to smooth things over, and then a slow fade from the screen entirely. 6 seasons in, he was simply gone, with no episode ever built around explaining why. Two of the most beloved men to ever appear on Hardcore Pawn left the same business within a few years of each other, and only one of them got a real goodbye. Joe's exit, however ugly, at least gave fans closure. They knew what happened. They watched it happen. Rich's exit gave them nothing but a gap where a familiar face used to be, and a family that never seemed eager to fill it in. That gap didn't stay empty for long. Fans and insiders alike began offering their own explanations, filling in the blanks the Gold family left behind. Some of those explanations pointed to jealousy. Others pointed to something far messier, involving accusations nobody could quite prove, and a piece of the story even people close to Rich have refused to fully spell out. Depending on who was telling it, the story of what happened to Rich Pyle could sound like 3 completely different shows. 3 explanations, 0 confessions. The first explanation surfaced years after Rich had already disappeared from the screen, and it wasn't flattering. It echoed the very thing Rich had accused Les of that day on camera, except this time the questions were pointed at him. One unconfirmed account claimed an internal audit of his department had turned up serious problems. Company credit cards used for personal purchases, expense reports that didn't match reality, purchases made without sign-off. Nobody with the authority to confirm it ever did. If true, it raised a very different possibility. Rich may have simply broken the trust that came with running someone else's business for that long. Rich never gave that version much oxygen. When reporters pressed him directly about what happened, he offered almost nothing, saying only that he wasn't legally able to discuss most of it. That kind of silence usually means one thing: there's a reason he can't say more. That second theory has followed Rich for years, repeated by fans and insiders alike. He had simply become too big for the shop that employed him. In a business built entirely around the Gold family name, a store manager who outshone the owners wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a threat to the entire premise of the show. Whether that theory holds up or not, it's the one that refuses to die. Mostly because it's the one that makes the most sense of a firing nobody ever properly explained. Then there's a third account, and it may be the strangest of the three. Bobby Janiak, another longtime face from the shop's security team, has hinted publicly that there's far more to the story than either the misconduct theory or the jealousy theory covers. According to Bobby, tension between Rich and his own wife spilled out onto social media, escalating to a point where Les and Seth felt they had to personally step in and put a stop to it. Bobby has even said Rich was quietly put on probation before he left, though he's stopped short of explaining why. He's called whatever really happened in the story's grand finale, and he's been clear about one thing. Fans wouldn't guess it if they tried. Bobby left the shop himself in 2016, saying afterward that he too felt taken advantage of by Les, which gives his account a very different kind of weight. 25 years of loyalty ended somewhere inside that tangle, and the man at the center of it has spent over a decade choosing his words carefully enough that none of the three stories can be ruled out completely. What makes the silence stand out even more is how loudly the Gold family has spoken about everything else. Every other controversy that touched this shop got its moment on camera, resolved in full view of the audience that paid to watch. Rich's story is the one glaring exception, and the more that exception sat there unaddressed, the more it started to look less like an oversight and more like a choice. What the family let you see instead. Hardcore Pawn was never shy about airing its dirty laundry, at least when it came to everyone except Rich. Big Joe's downfall played out in full, from the accusation to the arrest to the moment he walked out of the building he'd worked in for years. Viewers didn't have to guess what happened to him. They watched every second of it unfold, and the show did not attempt to soften it or explain it away. The stolen art scandal got the same treatment. During the show's 8th season, 2 customers who called themselves Tony and Dina walked in claiming to be family friends of Les, hoping that connection would help them offload a stack of paintings worth well over $1 million. What they hadn't counted on was the actual owner calling the shop directly to explain the paintings had never been theirs to sell in the first place. Les, Seth, and Ashley listened to the call in real time, stunned, and the whole messy unraveling made it to air exactly as it happened. Christina's story ended even more publicly. An employee at the shop for 7 years by then, she was eventually caught pawning fake items and pocketing the cash for herself. Les didn't hide how much the betrayal stung, telling her on camera that he'd hired her, trained her, and treated her like family. When the scheme fell apart, she wasn't quietly let go. She was escorted out of the building in handcuffs, in front of the cameras, in front of everyone. The show didn't blink. It let the consequences play out exactly as ugly as they were. That pattern makes Rich's disappearance even harder to explain away as simple bad luck. This was a family and a production that clearly had no problem showing employees get caught, get fired, and get walked out the door on camera when the story called for it. They did it for Joe. They did it for Christina. They let a phone call from a stranger expose an entire deal gone wrong in front of a national audience. And yet, the one departure that mattered most to longtime fans, a man who'd been there longer than anyone else on that floor, got no such treatment at all. Joe's story, at least, eventually found its own quiet ending off camera. After the arrest and the very public fall from a job he'd held for years, he stepped away from the pawn business entirely and built something new for himself, eventually running a trucking company he named High Gear Transportation out of Livonia, Michigan. with his wife, Felice, and their kids beside him. Whatever the show put him through, he got to walk into a second chapter that had nothing to do with the cameras that once defined him. Rich never got that same clean break, at least not one the Gold family ever acknowledged. No arrest, no handcuffs, no phone call exposing a scheme. Just a slow fade from a show that seemed to have no problem airing every other uncomfortable ending it came across. That double standard raises a sharper question. Why would a family, this comfortable airing every other consequence on camera, choose silence only once? Whatever the reason, Rich's silence stands out even more against how loudly everyone else connected to this shop has kept living their lives since the cameras stopped rolling, sometimes for the better, and sometimes fueling rumors far uglier than the truth. Everyone else got their ending. Everyone else in this story eventually found their footing, and most of them got it without needing a courtroom, a scandal, or a single headline questioning whether they'd survive. Les never slowed down. He turned up on Food Network's Chopped after the show ended, showing off kitchen skills nobody knew he had. He'd spent 40 years pricing other people's junk to the dollar. Now he was being timed on a plate of mystery basket scallops. He made it clear in interviews that retirement wasn't on his mind. He's also stayed visible through charity work, including his support for Wigs for Kids, a nonprofit that provides hairpieces to children with medical hair loss. In 2019, he said outright that he'd welcome a return to television if the opportunity came around. 2 years later, he expanded the business further, opening new locations in Southgate and Lincoln Park, growing a company that, according to every account, was doing anything but falling apart. Seth stayed close to his father and closer to the business, taking on the vice president title and launching an online payment platform called Fast Pawn in 2019, developed in partnership with PawnMate Inc., to help customers manage their loans without setting foot in the store. He started a podcast with Les, interviewing guests from well outside the pawn world, and quietly donated alongside his father to a fund helping Detroit students launch their own small businesses. His personal life, by choice, has stayed almost entirely out of view. Ashley built something of her own entirely. She left the day-to-day of the shop behind to run her own jewelry brand and a social media consulting business. She documented all 35 pounds of a 2020 weight loss publicly, proof that leaving the family business was easier than leaving the treadmill. Then she settled into a quieter life outside the city with her husband. She still shows up when it matters to the family, just no longer behind that counter every day. Felix, the bearded security guard fans never got an explanation for, simply packed up and moved to Austin. Nobody ever got a reason for why he left. Given the beard, most fans just assumed he'd wandered off to go be a lumberjack instead. He chose to disappear from public life entirely, rather than let anyone speculate further. Nobody accused him of anything. He just left, and the internet let him. Rich, meanwhile, kept working, kept drumming in a local band, and eventually became the host and executive producer of a cornhole show. Of all things, building an entirely new career out of a sport most people had never taken seriously before he did. In between, he spent time back in front of cameras as an urban prospector on National Geographic's Meltdown, where a hunt for rocket parts in the Mojave Desert once introduced him to a self-financed rocket builder fans nicknamed Waldo, and later launched his own clothing line, RPM Gear, with Darren Hamilton. By every account available, he's doing fine. But fine isn't the same as resolved, and resolved is the one thing his story with Les has never been. That same silence, the one nobody in the Gold family ever bothered to break, has become oddly perfect fuel for an internet that doesn't need facts to go viral. In 2023, a fake death hoax spread across social media claiming Les had passed away, complete with a spoofed news website built to look legitimate. Seth shut it down within a day, posting proof his father was very much alive. More recently, a wave of videos have claimed Les lost everything, that his empire quietly collapsed, that some undisclosed disaster wiped out everything he built. None of it holds up. The shop is still standing. The family is still working. The only thing that's actually vanished without explanation is one relationship nobody in the Gold family has ever chosen to talk about. So Les has explained the business, denied the rumors, and stood by every decision he's made, except one. Is his silence on Rich proof he has nothing left to hide, or proof of the one thing he never wanted the cameras to catch? And now that everyone else in this story got their own ending, do you think Rich is still waiting for his, or has he simply stopped waiting for Les to give it? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.